Yo, what is up? You have found We Like the Blazers. I am Brandon Goldner, and with me, as always, it is Ryan Whitledge. Ryan, what is up, man?
Not much. Just got off work like an hour ago. This may be the quickest I've ever showered and rearranged my living room in order to record this stupid little podcast in the history of things. But yeah, I'm here.
I don't believe that you showered, because I know when we started, you had like a giant fleck of something in your beard. I think you said it was a...
Because I was eating a sandwich. You leave my McChicken habits alone.
You need to pull a Kramer and start preparing and eating your food in the shower. With us, we have Steve Dewald. He is the co-host of the Church of Roy podcast and, of course, the associate editor at my alma mater, Blazers Edge. Steve, what is happening?
Hey, fellas. I made sure I made my salad in the shower before I got on the show. Just really consolidated time, so we're good to go for tonight. But
there is a joke there.
Do you have the garbage disposal in the drain, though? Because
that's how you have to do it.
Yeah.
So otherwise, it's a huge mess.
That's what clinched it for Kramer, for sure.
Yeah. So anyway, beautiful day here. Obviously, the Blazers are still blazering things right now, so we're all kind of living in that world. So, but I'm happy here to talk to both of you. Me and Brandon were two ships kind of crossing in the night at Blazers Edge, and Ryan, I've known for quite a while now, one of my OG podcast guys.
Heck yeah. No, we appreciate you taking the time. And yeah, I am thankful that you are here, because as much as my voice may be lying right now, because I'm basically screaming at the microphone, I'm actually pretty exhausted. I set a personal record run yesterday, longest run of my life, 16 miles. I am definitely sore.
Who was chasing you?
A bear, several bears.
I hope so. There is zero reason to run that far otherwise.
It was, actually, I felt pretty good. I have a lot to brag about with that, but all this is just to say my joints are feeling good. My tendons are feeling good. Like, my muscles are sore. My entire soul is sore. But to supplement, I am drinking grape Crystal Light, which is really weird, but it's extra weird because I found out it is caffeinated. So yes, like, I'm going to pretend to be full of energy, because now I'm now sucking down some basically aspartame caffeine fruit punch.
I mean, I can't judge. I have a Diet Pepsi and a beer.
Oh,
right.
Steve, what are you drinking?
I almost went the beer. I'm just water. I've been working on my underground sprinklers for the last couple hours. Of course, my father came in from the east side of the state. My parents are here visiting, and I don't know if anybody can relate to this, but when you have a yard and your dad prides himself on how green his is on the eastern side of the state, if there's one small patch that's not getting water, we have been carefully dissecting the rotation planes for all my sprinklers all morning. So I am getting water, beer later.
I have never gotten my ass chewed more in my life than when my grandpa came out for like a year and a half, and I was like 13 years old, from Minnesota to come stay with me and my mom. And he decided to come help me do yard work. And by help, that means yell and hit me with a stick and tell me everything I was doing wrong.
I will say my father has chilled way out since he has become a grandpa. So it is cool to kind of see this. And it's funny because I want to take my daughter and go like, this isn't always like this. but no, it's been a very I always love it when he comes to visit now. So getting all the to-do list, because my wife is now my father's favorite child. So we got to make sure everything's good on that front.
Don't they have those services now that you can like pay people to come out and paint your lawn to make it look like it's green, even though it's not? I feel like that's what I would do. It's like, oh yeah, it's totally green.
Yeah, just go AstroTurf. You need AstroTurf. When I lived AstroTurf, you can put in the putting green.
When I lived in Arizona, I was always very jealous of the AstroTurf yard. So I'm, if climate change continues to trend this way, I think we'll all be having AstroTurf yards here real shortly.
Oh, the Brady Bunch fantasy has finally come to light because of climate change. Ryan, I actually don't know where we're starting this show. I have some things I want to talk about. I'm sure that we all do, but maybe I'll just hand the keys of this boat over to you.
I texted you earlier and said you're captaining this damn ship.
Did you really? Okay.
I did.
So the first thing that you wanted to talk about, my phone is over there and I can't reach it. I know what I wanted to talk about.
The Jason Quick article is where I wanted to start, and kind of because that, I mean, we've had these assumptions with the Dame press conference and everything that's been going on, and the Henry Abbott, that no-name writer that nobody ever heard of.
Oh my god,
that was one of the most upset. Like, of all the things that have been upsetting, like obviously there's some very important things that should be upsetting, but of like the minor things that should be upsetting, I think people not knowing who Henry Abbott was. upset me the most of the minor things that we should be upset about. Like I was like, come on, people.
Yeah. The amount of times that I saw this dude's just trying to make a name for himself. No, pretty sure he made a name for himself when he created blogging about a sport on ESPN.
Exactly.
Yeah. By the way, I heard through the grapevine of grapevines that, I mean, we already assumed this, but I believe that the source Henry Abbott had for that original report was a good source. I'll just leave it there. I wanted to actually ask Steve something before we get into the specifics of the Jason Quick article. I have contended that it seems to me lately, Jason Quick has been pretty easy on Neil Olshey, frankly. Like I've been vocal on Twitter, or was at least in the last couple months, about it doesn't seem as though Jason Quick is being particularly critical of Neil Olshey. And I wanted to ask, because Ryan has his own opinion, which is wrong. Do you get that same impression?
Well,
because with this article, I kind of felt the same thing yet again. I don't know.
Quick was asked this question the other day and
By
gave
who?
an answer.
When?
Oh, I'll let Steve go first.
Yeah,
but
okay.
So I think, let's face it, when we were really kind of getting the news that Terry Stotts was probably on his way out several months ago, it was Jason Quick who brought a lot of that news to the table and really drew that hard line and fueled that segment of the fan base. It was, and he legitimized a lot of that. And also, I mean, some of the result on the floor. I mean, let's face it, this is more of a gray area. This is not a black and white thing. There is roster construction and coaching, but Jason Quick's articles definitely kind of fueled the fire for one side and legitimized a lot of those arguments. So, yeah, I do believe he has been more favorable to Neil Olshey, but I think even with this article, and I think we'll get into it a little later, but what he's saying, yes, it's a little more flowery about what the Blazers are doing, but it's really the same information at this point that a lot of other outlets are saying. You just kind of got to wade through some more framing that might be. And as a journalist, I don't want to criticize Jason Quick too much because with this Blazers regime, you kind of have to do that sort of stuff to have the information that Jason Quick is bringing to the table. It's our job once it's there to sort through it and make sure that we can get the true message and he can continue to go after what he's looking for.
And I totally get that you can't burn your relationships with people because that's his livelihood, is having those working relationships. So I do understand that. So yeah, I think that's fair. Ryan, what were you going to say?
So he got asked that. He does his weekly radio hit for 1080 The Fan. They have him on between like 15, 30 minutes or whatnot with Isaac and Suk on primetime. And he's either on at like 3:30 or 5:30. It depends on when the Angels play.
Well, he was early this week because I think it was like his wife's birthday, I believe is what it was.
Yeah, he was running around prepping for his wife's birthday. But I think Rob actually called him out and was like, dude, are you an Olshey truther? Like, are you just like the Olshey mouthpiece? Because that's what it feels like. And he did give like kind of the canned answer of like, well, yes and no. And the yes part of that was, I can't necessarily burn the bridges and whatnot, but the no, and he kind of references before, remember, he was let go from NBC Sports Northwest because he was being too critical of the team. So Blazers management came down and said, get him off the damn air. And then that's when he went over to The Athletic. But it's kind of like with what Steve said. There's kiss assing in everything in sports reporting and whatnot. You can't burn your sources. He's obviously, but I've never read Quick's stuff as that. He always tries to provide like the justification. He's not, or the reason. And it's not necessarily like a okay, here's what Olshey told me he did. It's like, I think this is probably what Olshey did. And not like trying to sell him up, but just trying to provide like, give people a better idea of what's maybe going through Olshey's head at the time, as opposed to necessarily getting it directly from him, a la Woj.
I think though, with this most recent article, the part that did get me where I questioned why it needed to be in there was basically trying to tie this into a bow of inactivity could equal the 2019 Western Conference Finals run. And I'm like, we just watched this team get blasted by a short-handed Denver Nuggets squad. I don't think really now is the time to go down that road. I think it's so clear now that this roster needs some significant changes if we are going to consider the Blazers at this point with Damian Lillard a true championship contender.
Yeah, and I think that's honestly been clear to a lot of people for a really long time. I mean, can any of us remember a time when national reporters said, oh yeah, like the Blazers are a title contender. Has that happened in Damian Lillard's career? Like maybe that 2013 squad, pre Achilles with Wes Matthews, like that's maybe it. And even that, they were overachieving a little bit up until that point. As good as that team was, that was the best the Blazers have been in Dame's career. And so the talent hasn't been there. I think that's been obvious to a lot of people for a really long time. And like you said, that Western Conference Finals run, I mean, they didn't have Nurkic. They got past OKC. That's great. Battled it out with Denver to 7 games. And again, they overachieved. I think it's odd to me that, well, it's actually not odd. This goes into conspiracy theory stuff that maybe I'll hold for now. I'm going to give it back to Ryan to actually give us.
I want that. Give me the tinfoil hat. Give me the conspiracy.
Tinfoil hat thing is that this goes back to ownership. Jody Allen, she doesn't want to own this team long term. Okay, we all know that. That's completely fine. That's her prerogative. The thing that I cannot figure out, I've thought through this, and maybe I just need to ask more people. At what point is this team worth the most to Jody Allen to sell? Is it with an aging superstar with multiple years left on his deal? Or is it with a team that has a fresh start and lots of future assets? Is that a team that's more valuable to a potential buyer than the team as constructed with Damian Lillard as its best player? And I don't know the answer to that. And that's where I think that, like, when we think about, well, we have to maximize Dame's prime. Well, yeah, if you're trying to win as many games as possible, if you're trying to win a championship, if you believe that Damian Lillard can lead a championship team with the right roster around him, then yes, you're going to assume that. But I don't think Jody Allen assumes that. And because of that, I don't think Neil Olshey assumes that. I don't think that his job security is dependent on maximizing Damian Lillard's prime. I really don't. I just haven't figured out like what's most valuable to Jody Allen. But to me, it seems clear it's not like slam dunk, maximize Dame's prime. I don't think that's where her head is.
I don't want to derail this thing too much, but I totally see where you're coming from in this. And I think for me, obviously, it seems like if you're an owner that's looking to sell, you want to hold out to see how fast the expansion comes because you want that money.
See, somebody who agrees with me. She's waiting for the expansion money.
I think is a clear benchmark. I don't think that's too hard to see. I mean, granted, we did see Minnesota sell this year, but I think the thing that I would say the owner is probably trying to sell is stability. And this is where it gets really scary for me for the Blazers. Is do you build around a pool of new assets or do you keep an aging superstar on your team? Here, I think is the doomsday scenario is the Blazers try to haphazardly split the difference here and you end up with the worst of both worlds.
Yep.
And that is a disaster scenario that I can totally see this team walking down. Like I think they believe that they are okay with being just a repeat playoff team and not a true title contender, which there is some merit to that. There is going to the playoffs every year. That is an achievement. But at the grand scheme of things, this fan base is hungry for a true title contender. And I just am terrified that they're going to try to do this. Okay, when they do have to move Damian Lillard, is it a package that isn't a true rebuild? Are they going to try to piece something together with some existing assets and really try to rebuild this 50 cents on the dollar? And that's what really scares me about the future.
Well, not to make this into a finance show, but maybe I'll lob this to either of you, because again, I don't know the answer to this, but how much more money do you make as a franchise when you are a legitimate title contender and or you win a title? Like, how much more money are you getting from the gate, from merchandising, from television rights? I mean, some of those television stuff is kind of already locked in as of now. You can't change that. Like, how much more profitable is it for a team to win a title than to just continue to go to the playoffs? And again, that's something I don't know the answer to. Maybe one of you two have more insight into that.
I can't remember. I think it was per game, but every playoff game, I think, brings in like an additional $1.2 or $1.3 million. So if you think about it that way, you make a deep title run, and especially if you're, you have home court advantage or whatnot, guaranteed at least an extra 16, 17, $18 million right there.
But I mean, does that outweigh like the penalty of going into the luxury tax to get a team good enough to advance further in the playoffs than like first round, second round?
Just look how the league's assembled right now. I mean, the 4 teams that are in cap hell are, even worse than the Blazers, are the Bucks, Clippers, Nets, and Warriors. And I think at full strength, any one of those teams is considered a true title contender. So obviously, there's some smart people in charge of a lot of those organizations. And I believe in order to run at that high of a payroll, they believe it is justified to do so if you are a true title contender. So I think absolutely it pays for itself. And I think it is. I think once you hit a certain point, I'm sure it's exponential growth that you hit this point where, you know, you have fans in every market now. You are the ABC games. You are, you know, the primetime ESPN games. And now with jersey sponsors and a lot of the other stuff going on in the arena, you can market that to those advertisers going forward. I think it really just hits a point where it really accelerates.
Yeah, and that's so that tends to mesh with my assumption, which was the better your team is, the more profitable it is for all sorts of reasons. And like having a player like Damian Lillard on the Olympic team playing in China, like that must be huge for reaching international fans and saying, I want to buy a Blazers jersey now, or what have you, right? I mean, CJ McCollum, his shoe deal is with Li Ning, it's also based in China. I mean, we're not talking about CJ, but yeah. So I don't know. I mean, for this, I always just assume that it's better for the owner, more profitable for them to have a very, very good team. And in my view, if you have a player like Damian Lillard, why wouldn't you maximize that? But that's not how it's feeling to me right now. So I don't know.
And I think there are extremes to do it the other way, but I think you have to go to such an extreme that the league has tried to eliminate that as far as having a cap floor, because we saw Donald Sterling with the Clippers for decades pay nothing to his players and let people walk without re-signing them. And that team consistently turned a profit in LA, and they were terrible. So, But I think the league has put safeguards and guidance in place where that's not the case. You are incentivized to run your team competitively.
Interesting. All right, Ryan, why don't you walk us through this quick article?
Okay. Yeah, I'm just kind of scrolling through it. There's a couple little points that I want to kind of hit on. We'll go in a little bit of the order that he brought him up. For starters, you know, it talks about how, you know, Lillard and God, why am I blanking? Olshey. There we go. I forgot his name. Sheesh.
That's probably for the best. Sometimes I wish I could forget his name too.
I long for that day.
There will be a day that we're gonna be like, what was that one dude's name? He was like a soap opera actor, and then he ran the team into the ground. Oh, Neil Olshey. It's waiting for that.
But you know, they sat down, and you know, quick touches on that. It sounds like he's going. The plan is, you know, number one is to re-sign Norman Powell. So, however realistic you think that can be, if I was Powell, I wouldn't necessarily be on board with getting in with these circus animals. But you know, re-sign Norman Powell and run back the starting lineup, but bolster the bench. And so I made the joke in a group thread the other day where one of my friends, or where, you know, Brandon Kennedy, he was super optimistic about it and had all sorts of high hopes. And I'm like, yeah, well, it's going to be an all-in year, you know, all in on the margins, the Olshey special. And that's what it looks like we're going to get. He's going to try to bolster the bench. So hopefully Hazonia his phone breaks or something, so he doesn't come back. But, you know, like if you're Dame, what do you think? Okay, actually, no, not if you're Dame. If you're Olshey, how do you sell that plan to Dame? I want you guys both to like put yourself in Olshey's shoes and do your best sell job for, hey, Dame, we're going to run back the same starting five, but we'll try to get you a better bench. You know, maybe it wasn't the world's best idea to pair Melo and Cantor together. So we'll do a little bit better.
I mean, first off, how dare you put me in his shoes? But second, if I am to do this, I think there is probably... I think with Damian Lillard, he's always struck me as a very genuine superstar. I think one of the most genuine. I think when he talks, he means what he says. Loyalty is huge. And I believe if I was just like transported into that position, I would take ownership for some of the mistakes I have made in the past. And when you accept that you have made mistakes with cap space, with being a little too conservative on making moves, there at least might be hope that you have acknowledged these faults and that you're willing to move forward and learn from that. Now, granted, I have not got that from this management group at all. Yeah, but that
real quick, I want to interject the definition of humility is a modest or low view of one's own importance. No. Well, continue.
but I think that's what you have to do. And I think on the grander scheme of things, getting back to the Blazers, is you kind of have this chicken and egg situation with Norman Powell and Damian Lillard, where Norman Powell probably only wants to stick around if Damian Lillard's there, and then Damian Lillard only wants to stick around if Norman Powell's going to be there, and this roster continues to build competitively. So it's just kind of this catch-22 where I don't know how this is going to play out, and I don't know what Olshey can do other than say, I've made some mistakes in the past. I'm going to be as aggressive as possible, but I think that has some faults in it that I'm sure we're going to touch on as this goes on.
So Olshey in this situation is the spouse who got caught cheating, who's like, I'm sorry, honey, I won't do this again. I promise I'll be better. And then is going to immediately head to the strip club and try to find another hooker and more blow. Okay.
Jesus.
I feel like Olshey is the dude who's saying it wasn't me over and over again, because that's basically what he said. Although I have to give the most small amount of credit in the last press conference with, introducing Coach Billups, Olshey actually did hint at the fact that it was, his job to make the team better. And he said that he took accountability for that. So that was a minor shift in the right direction. Ryan, I have a more simple.
Good job, whoever wrote that speech for him.
Well, hey, even sometimes the bare minimum is nice to see when you haven't seen it for a while. But Ryan, I'm going to answer your question a little bit more simply. I think the question was, if the only changes that are going to happen are on the margins, how does that strike Dame? I think the answer is simple. Not good enough. Period. And I think Dame made that really clear.
My question was, put yourself in Olshey's shoes and sell Dame on it. So you can't just take the Dame's going to say not good enough. You have to convince him. So how would you convince him if you were Olshey, if that's what his plan is?
I don't think that you can convince him. I don't think he would try to convince him. I think Olshey he has his faults. I think he's smart enough to know where Dame sits on this. And if ownership is basically saying, we don't really want Damian Lillard on the team anymore for X number of reasons, and, sell high. I mean, we've talked about that, Ryan, that if you're going to trade Damian Lillard, about now is the right time to do it before he can't get any better. I don't think. I think he's as good as he will ever be. So before he proves that he's deteriorating, before he gets injured or what have you, I think now's the time to trade him. So if I'm Olshey and I'm trying to sell Dame on it, I don't try to sell Dame on it. I think that's the answer is you don't bullshit Damian Lillard. You tell him what's up. You ask him can you just please be quiet so that we can trade you for as much value as possible. But I think that the biggest thing with this, if I'm Damian Lillard, if you tick through the numbers of teams that have a need for a Super Bowl dominant point guard, who have the assets to trade for him, who are in a position to take on someone who's now 31 years old, what teams are those? What team is in a position to trade for Damian Lillard and then be vaulted to contention? Because I can't think of any. And I'm sure that there are some, and I'm sure that one of you is going to correct me right now. So anyway, to answer your question, Ryan, I don't think Olshey sells Dame on this. If this is truly Olshey's plan, if this is not just, something to say publicly because you're working the deck kind of behind closed doors, which is what I desperately hope is happening, I don't have confidence in that. I don't think that you can sell Dame on this. So that's a lot of rambling, but those are my thoughts on it.
All right. So the next part. And
all right, that's a great.
No. I mean, I want to unpack a little bit of this.
Thank you. Okay, bailing me out.
I just wanted to move on.
So
fuck you, Ryan.
Sorry. In my defense, I got a work text about halfway through that, so I missed about like 30% of what you said.
Good. I'm just messing with you. I'm sorry.
No,
you fuckers.
now I've lost my train of thought. I think with Lillard, as far as what he said and the bar he's set, and I like Brandon said, I hope that they're shuffling the deck back here, but by Lillard coming out and saying they have to improve in order for me to stay, it's really a self-fulfilling prophecy of they're not going to be able to do it when you say stuff like that, because now, and Eric Pincus of Bleacher Report really hit on this today. Article came out this morning where basically every executive in the NBA knows the Blazers are up against it. And they're going to have to make a trade to make Dame happy. And I believe the quote was, no one's going to help Olshey out of this Lillard mess. And if I'm a team and I've said this over and over again for the last 2 weeks, if Neil Olshey calls me and I'm the other team, I say, give me your best offer and then double it, because I know you have to make this move. And go ahead. Well,
I can think of, and I'm foreshadowing, I can think of another team whose best player and coach threw their second best player so fully under the bus that they had to back the bus up and then run over them again publicly. Like, so I can think of at least one team who might have a player kind of like that. And I mean, maybe we can guess who I'm talking about, but so like they're kind of in the same spot too. I'm talking about Philadelphia, Ben Simmons, right? Like, I mean, I don't know, like that's not the only example of someone who may be similarly desperate to make something happen.
Yeah, but I think the Sixers are in a little bit different situation as far as what they can do. I think the Sixers can take a loss on Ben Simmons, and he's the second best player on their team, and arguably the third best on some nights. You still build around Joel Embiid. This would be a scenario where we would be having this conversation about CJ McCollum potentially. But with Dame, I think it's clear he obviously is the best player in the Blazers, and quick touches on in that article is he is a player that is of a talent level where he stacks up to all the other number ones in the league. So like you said, he's at the height of his powers. He could be the best player on a title team if the number 2 and the number 3 options are also there. And I just don't know if they can get there. And when, as far as talking about, I don't know what team could trade for him and still be in title contention, you have to understand that when Damian Lillard actually makes this trade request official, what a team is probably going to have to give up to get him, depending on how it goes. If everybody plays ball, that trade value could come down, or it could be more focused on future assets like we saw with the Brooklyn situation. I think there are teams out there that can make this move. Now, obviously, the Lakers are not one of them. Anytime I see a Lakers rumor, you shoot that into the moon and you blow up the moon. Like it's not going to happen.
You don't think Kuzma and Taylor Horton Tucker is enough to get Dame?
God, no.
Come on.
But what
if they threw in Alex Caruso, Steve?
I wouldn't put it past Miami to try to get something done here and still be a competitive team going forward. And I think the Knicks, if they don't nix it, which it sounds like they are moving forward in a different situation, I think they're running their team competently. I think they have an asset pool that they could get a player like him and build around the fringes in that market and still be very competitive. And then finally, I think the Mavericks are the wild card here. I think you have a coach that Damian Lillard obviously likes in charge there. You have a clear-cut superstar. You have a team that has most of their future assets. They have salaries to match it. I think they could get it done and be at a much better level as long as they hang on to just one player.
I'm just thinking about the draft assets that the Mavericks have. Do they have anything besides their own picks?
I think so. I believe they're almost done with what they gave up to get Porzingis. So they're going to recoup all of theirs. But yeah, they don't have a lot of their own future assets, but there is potential that they could add to it this summer, just with how they're going to navigate potentially Tim Hardaway Jr.'s contract, whether or not there's a sign-in trade or you find a tertiary deal there. But there's opportunities there because they do have cap flexibility, which we've seen just through this team. You can pick up additional picks just by having that cap flexibility.
The other two teams, when I think about who has a ton of draft assets, one are the Oklahoma City Thunder, who are not in a position to trade for Damian Lillard for a lot of reasons. But the other one, which is kind of interesting, are the Pelicans. I mean, could they convince themselves that like Dame and Zion is like this amazing 1-2? Because I know that they have assets from the Anthony Davis deal. Yeah, I don't know. It's depressing to think about. But anyway, yeah.
Yeah, I think the Pelicans are the most interesting, obviously. I think if I'm going to wrap my head around any trade package, I think it is a Brandon Ingram-based package with a bunch of assets. I think that gives the Blazers a chance to move forward and be competitive and have a lot of really attractive assets. I did talk to a good friend of the always curious in the Portland market, Jonathan Tjarks of The Ringer. We talked about a little bit about this trade, and his main concern was the timelines on these two players and how they line up might not just sync as far as Zion and Dame and how they want to move forward as an organization. But definitely an interesting pairing. And also, like you said, very depressing to think about. Very
depressing. I mean, the one thought I have, I mean, the ages don't really line up very well, but you did have that chatter from Zion's family, right? That I think that there's some reporting that, maybe we're going to try to get him to move away from the Pelicans if they can't prove that they're serious. And so maybe something like this, be like, hey, look, we're actually serious about winning. Like, please don't leave. Right. So maybe that could be it. What else was in that quick article? I mean, besides the way that, I briefly skimmed it. I'll be honest. I didn't read it super deeply, but it did read to me that the Blazers are prepared to just make some moves at the margins.
Yep.
Was there anything else in that article that jumped out to you as like worthy of crying about or talking about?
I mean, as far as like, obviously we're getting the same information on Norman Powell, that he is the primary focus. The Blazers feel like they're in a good position to re-sign him, but clearly there's going to be a lot of competition there. But really the focus there, the real takeaway from me was, the Blazers are probably going to move forward and move around the margins. And this is where I think it's interesting with the Quick narrative. And then when you line it up next to what Pincus said today, because they're both saying the same things. So Quick at least makes it sound like, and this might be the old Shea angle that we talked about earlier, that it's the Blazers' own decision that they're going to work on the margins. What Pincus is saying is the Blazers are being forced to work on the margins because basically no one is going to throw Neil O'Shea a lifeline here. And we've seen that consistently with him, how he's operated with other teams. I mean, there is a short list of teams that Neil O'Shea does deals with. And I don't think, and those teams really aren't right now in a position to bail the Blazers out, nor do they have any interest in doing so. That's why, for instance, the Sixers. I don't understand why the Sixers would try to help out the Blazers at all with the CJ McCollum trade when they know that if they make that situation unstable, they could potentially get in the running for Damian Lillard. So the Pincus and the Quick article are interesting because I do think that is where we are trending, where we are going, because both of those articles are saying the same thing. It's the Blazers have limited options and they're going to work around the margins.
Which does make me, it kind of goes back to me then, if the Blazers are going to try to make a CJ trade, it's going to be with another team that's in whatever way, shape, or form similarly desperate, or maybe not like, desperate in a different way, that this other team is also feeling some amount of pressure. I can't remember, was Daryl Morey with the Rockets when the Blazers made the Rocco trade? I don't think he was anymore at that point,
no,
was he?
Okay. He would have just been out of there, I think. Yeah.
Shucks. Okay, well, there goes that. I actually did, though, I mean, if we're good on the Quick article, I wanted to bring up kind of some mock off-season stuff. So I don't know if you are a subscriber to Dunked On Prime, the Dunked On podcast with Nate Duncan and Daniel LaRue. So every year they do a mock off-season, which is one of my favorite podcasts that I look forward to every single year. It's always Nate Duncan, Daniel LaRue. They have Kevin Pelton, Saddle Zone from ESPN, and then they have, I think, Dan Feldman coming in. And basically what they do is that Dan Feldman, Daniel LaRue, and Kevin Pelton, they each take 10 of the NBA's 30 teams, and then Nate Duncan serves as the player agent for all the players. And they run through all of the top free agents. And sometimes, like this year, they started with the first 6 picks of the draft. Just because of the timing, you kind of need to know which player goes where in order to know what their needs are and how they're going to be met. But I thought it was super interesting because in their mock off season, and by the way, I mean, it's like 4 hours of podcasting. Like it is a chunk, but I always really look forward to it. In their mock off season, they had a couple things happening. First, they had a sign and trade of Derek Jones Jr. to the Mavericks for Josh Richardson, which I thought that, oh, what's up, man? We were just going to pretend like you were here the whole time. But now Ryan had to go, and I don't know what he was running naked down the street. I don't know. He was doing something.
He's got more sandwich in his beard again.
Oh, come on, man. Clean up. Ryan,
that's not sandwich.
We have pivoted to the mock off season that I wanted to get to with the Dunked On podcast. And just in time, because I'm going to go through it. Here's what they had for the Blazers. I want to get your opinion. The first thing was a sign and trade Derek Jones Jr. to the Mavs for Josh Richardson. So that's number one. Number two was the Blazers were able to retain Norm Powell. The number he came in at was actually a little lower. I think what we've seen is that he wants like 20 a year. And I think that in this mock-off season, he came in a little lower than that. Ryan, you were going to say?
I was going to say the Norman Powell thing is number 2, because I bumped that up to like step 1 in all of this, because every decision you make in your offseason is going to depend on whether he comes back. That's
fair, except for I wanted to save the best for last, which was the Blazers trading CJ McCollum and Anthony Simons and then a top 4 protected pick swap to the Philadelphia 76ers for one Ben Simmons. The reason why I thought that one was interesting is because Danny LaRue was acting as the general manager for the city. He was acting as Daryl Morey for the Sixers. And he called he called like 10 different teams trying to gauge interest, and they were running through who could they offer and how much, and who can they offer and how much. And just through that, it turns out that the best deal, if Neil O'Shea were amenable and if the 76ers were amenable, was CJ and Anthony Simons. The salaries work. The Sixers get something in a position of need. They also get a young player in Ant Simons. And I was intrigued. And so let me kick it to Steve first. If the Blazers offseason, let's wipe away this Jason Quick article. It's all bullshit. It's all a smokescreen. O'Shea's actually going to get on the phone and get some work done. If the Blazers they lost Derrick Jones Jr. I can't remember I don't think they even got to Cantor and Melo. Let's assume Cantor and Melo were gone.
Fingers fucking crossed.
Oh my God. Enes Kanter played a really important role for a Western Conference Finals team, Ryan. And hey, Melo's a legend. Come on.
Sure, give him a banner.
Well, okay, that'd be great. Hey, we have division banners, so why don't we get a Melo banner? I think that's about the same value. But
dude, I think me and you could get a banner in there if we asked.
That's true. Yeah, that's a good point. So if the Blazers offseason, if it consisted of losing Melo, Cantor, Derrick Jones Jr., but then gaining Josh Richardson, retaining Norm Powell at like 17 a year, and then trading CJ and Simons for Ben Simmons, how would you feel? And I'm not asking if you think that this is instantly a title contending team with a new whiz bang coach that amazingly, like, Coach Billups just like brings this team to new heights. But how would you feel about that kind of an offseason? Is that like good, bad, and different? What's your thought on that?
I think it's definitely a different team. I think you're going to improve your defense drastically. What I am worried about in that setup is the offense and what Damian Lillard is going to have to do. We have seen what Josh Richardson looks like next to Ben Simmons before in Philadelphia. I have serious concerns about whether or not Ben Simmons and Yusuf Nurkic can coexist on the offensive end. I think they step on each other's turf quite a bit. So in that scenario, you're asking Damian Lillard to do a bunch on offense. And maybe they figure it out, but we've seen for this year, I mean, Damian Lillard's defensive numbers cratered this year. They took not one step back, but several. And you're looking at potentially those numbers staying the same for him. I mean, granted, you're going to get a little better because you're going to have Norman Powell on certain assignments and Ben Simmons. But I just think you're going to ask him to expend so much energy on the offensive end. I like that it is a shakeup, obviously, but I would hope they could do a little better than Josh Richardson if that is a third move. And if we're talking about me complaining about the third move here, we're moving in the right direction, and you can adjust that later. But I believe if you do get Ben Simmons, I would like to see another move where they potentially do something with Yusuf Nurkic and address the center position a little differently, and maybe go get another wing player that maybe is a floor spacer.
I think that's fair. Although, Steve, I was told that once Terry Stotts is gone, that Dame Lillard's going to turn into like a Steph Curry level defender. He's instantly going to go from bad to like average. I think that's fair.
God, that's the bar we have to climb, bad to average.
If Dame could be an average defender consistently, that would actually be fine. I think that would be more than fine. Ryan, what do you think about that offseason? Does that make you feel would you feel more or less hopeful? Let me put it this way. Would you feel more or less hopeful about the possibility that Damian Lillard would stay in Portland beyond this season if those were the moves that were made?
I have a very low bar for my happiness for next season. And that bar is literally there was multiple steps here and things that could happen. The only step I care about in this situation is if you can trade CJ and get Ben Simmons here. And if it's only going to take, I was crunching numbers here because I was getting caught up on the fact that Ben Simmons is making that much more than freaking CJ McCollum. And so I'm always like, why does everyone keep throwing in Anthony Simons, or whatnot? Doesn't that bump the salaries way up? But it doesn't. It makes it match a hell of a lot better. But if that's the only move you make, I'm happy. I've never necessarily been one, like Steve, you had said, you got to address the Yusuf Nurkic situation. I've never really, I don't know if I agree with that Simmons and Nurk can't play together because they both suck up space in the middle. And a lot of people will reference like, oh, well, look at Simmons and Embiid. Okay, well, Nurk's not getting the 30 touches a game that Embiid is in the paint. So, I mean, there is an opportunity to kind of clear it out a little bit. And you're giving me this, well, that's semantics nod, I can see, but no, I mean, literally my low bar is take a swing to get any sort of player of consequence, and Ben Simmons fits that bill. And I do that and I'm happy. And in all honesty, I could literally care less if it craters out and is an absolute abysmal failure, because at least you swung and tried something that is drastically new and different.
Well, go for it. Sorry.
I don't disagree with the last part. I mean, I'm all for taking a swing here, but as far as if you keep Nurk and Ben Simmons on the floor at the same time, what's Ben Simmons doing when he doesn't have the ball and Nurk's on the floor? I mean, we've seen what happens when people lose interest in Al-Farouq Aminu. We've seen what happens when people lose interest in Maurice Harkless. And you're talking about this on steroids with Ben Simmons. So I would like to see, I mean, I'm sure they could make it work, but to optimize the lineup, you would like to see maybe those two players move, because you're moving from a redundant skill set in the backcourt with Dame and CJ to a redundant skill set in the front court on paper with Yusuf Nurkic and Ben Simmons, with what they like to do on offense, which is smart decision making, passing out of the high post, and finishing around the rim. That's what you want those two guys to do. And if you can break that up a little bit, you might be in a better situation. That's all I'm saying.
Should they, if you get rid of Nurk, should they go the Houston route and go the Rocco small ball 5?
I think your crunch time, if you have Ben Simmons, I think your crunch time 5 is probably Ben Simmons or Rocco.
Yeah. Coin flip on whoever gets back there first.
But as far as the starting lineup goes, if you're looking for a minutes eater to go against traditional centers that play to start games and not these crunch time 5s, you can address that in a much cheaper way. You can address that with the Dwayne Dedmans of the world. Yeah. So that's why I say I would like to see that go in a different direction, maybe address the offense a little bit more from a floor spacing standpoint.
Kind of go the way that like the Warriors did back then. They'd start their center. You'd see them for like 8 minutes a game or whatnot. And then it's Draymond slid back and start playing that spot.
Yep.
I like calling him Draymond Green. Let me make an argument that I don't fully agree with. And I have heard
the best ones.
Yeah, exactly. So I've heard some folks, argue that if it were not for Terry Stotts, that we would see Damian Lillard as more of an off-ball player, that you'd see more player movement, more screens being set, more off-ball action. And so let's just say that with Nurkic, with Ben Simmons, with Dame, you're having people setting screens. You have Nurkic has the ball up at the elbow and there's all sorts of shit happening. And there's little pockets of space being created, and maybe one pocket of space. Oh, wow, Dame is open over there. Maybe one pocket of space. You have Simmons driving towards the rim for a dunk or something like that. Maybe you could see something like that, okay? And then the second thing that I don't know if I fully agree with is the Blazers in transition. Maybe the ghost of Dr. Jack Ramsey descends upon the Moda Center, and Norman Powell can run. Ben Simmons can certainly run. And we have not seen that from Damian Lillard. I don't think Nurkic could if he wanted to. And Covington looks okay in transition.
Well, Dame can, just nobody wants to run with him.
So maybe then, right? Maybe the Blazers under Coach Billups become this lots of off-ball movement, right? Like Damian Lillard looks different. He's less tired on offense, so he can put more energy on defense. And then the Blazers are moving more in transition. I don't know. I don't know if I fully believe the words coming out of my mouth, but maybe that's one way in which it could end up working. I don't know.
I want to stay away from the scheme aspect of this, because we do see what Damian Lillard and Terry Stotts did a little bit earlier when they had a little bit different setup personnel. There was a little bit more ball movement, I think. And if I'm being honest, I am not a huge pin this all on Terry Stotts guy, but I do think that there was some level of relaxation on expectation, and that I think lended itself to more isolation ball. And I think that was an Achilles heel for this Blazers offense at time. Now, granted, we're talking about an Achilles heel of one of the best offenses in the league, arguably the best. So you are picking at it, but you do see that energy level take its toll on the defensive end. I will say the very limited knowledge we have of what Coach Billups wants to do, which it is very limited, and we're not clear what his role was with the Clippers, because that is a loaded staff. But what we do have on video with him talking alongside film, there is a lot of coach speak, but the stuff that he routinely comes back to is pace and breaking up backline defense with rolling big men and creating a lot of that almost Spurs-esque pace and space ball. And we've seen that kind of come to fruition with the numbers that Paul George and Kawhi Leonard both put up this year. They both had career years as far as passing goes. So potentially, we could see that here, and maybe that gives Damian Lillard more energy on that end of the floor. But also, you're talking about a Clippers team where you had 2 stars limping to the finish line in the postseason as well.
So let me just summarize what you just said, Steve. What I heard you say is that with Ben Simmons and with Coach Billups, the Blazers will be a title contender. Lock it in. Thank you so much. End of podcast.
So how much of that glass that you claimed was Crystal Light is vodka? Because I got questions.
Tequila. there may be a splash of tequila in there. You never know.
So with that pace and space kind of thing, did you guys touch on the CJ for a top 4 pick part of Quick's article while I was gone?
No, let's do that.
We did skip past that.
Okay, good. Because
because you literally abdicated the podcast, you disappeared, turned your screen off, like no one knew where you were. I was texting you. I'm calling the cops. Like Jesus.
I just needed that other sandwich to get stuck in my beard. I was still broken up about that, but
I don't even think you're eating them. I think you're just ripping open a bag of McDonald's and mashing your face in it.
Yeah, I tell them, I care about the environment. Save the wrappers. Just put the sandwiches in the bag.
Give me the lettuce that you put on the chicken sandwich, please.
Oh, by the way, I found out that Ryan has never been to JoJo PDX. Boy, get down to Powell, get yourself a sandwich, get a 10-piece of the boneless wings or whatever. God, I got so much chicken yesterday after that run. I ate like 70,000 calories of delicious chicken. It was just, it was great.
You talking about chicken is what inspired me to get a McChicken sandwich. Or, I say really? A McChicken. I don't know. I just
you should have driven all the way, into the state because I know that you live in Washington. Yeah, driven but 30 miles round trip. It's totally worth it.
My job site's like I could kick a ball and hit Moda Center.
Well, then okay, you need to go to JoJo. Anyway, let's talk about the CJ for number 4.
Yeah, so that's been floated out there. Apparently, the Blazers are turning it down. I'm kind of in the camp of like. I can see that because if you look at, like a lot of the mock drafts, and this is part of the reason why I asked you on, Steve, because you are a draft whore, as it's guard heavy. Obviously, Cade Cunningham projected to go number 1. You got Jalen Suggs and Jalen Green. The only one that I could possibly see that would be of interest to the Blazers in this case would be an Evan Mobley. Oh, there he goes. Is Steve busting out his draft folder? Yes. Do you legit have a draft folder?
Of course I have a draft folder.
This guy's got a 3-ring binder with colored tabs on it.
Yeah, wow. Man.
This is unreal. I feel intimidated through the screen.
I will say I always have 2 goals every year is that before the draft is to talk to Steve about that. And then before free agency kicks in to talk to Eric Griffin.
Great. I mean, I don't know about me. There's a lot of really good draft people out there, but Eric is the man to talk to.
You're the only one who responds to my text. So.
Oh, there you go. Keep that in mind. So I want to be clear on where I think the origination of this rumor is. And I think what we want to talk about here is in Quick's article, he says lottery pick.
Top 4 lottery pick. Yeah.
Does it say top 4 in the article?
He says top 4.
I thought he said top 4 on the radio show, and that's where that came from.
Here, you keep talking. I will pull it up and fact check
I
this
could be
right
wrong.
now.
I could be wrong here, but anyway, at the top of the draft, Evan Mobley is certainly interesting as far as what you want to do defensively in the front court. Evan Mobley is a USC big man, center, power forward, very much in the mold of how USC has wanted to move forward with their big men. We've seen that with some of the guys who've recently come out. I can't pronounce, name is eluding me, but he's the rookie center for the Hawks this year. Very mobile, very skilled on both ends of the floor. But let's face it, with big men, it does take a couple of years for them to hit the ground running. If they're looking for like a win now type prospect, this list is kind of, I don't know if there's something at the top of this draft that really is clear cut there that makes sense for the Blazers. I think Jalen Suggs, not just because I am a Gonzaga fan, I think he is the most NBA ready guy. I think he can create for others. He can create for himself. He's played on a very big stage for a Gonzaga team that nearly went the distance as far as being unbeaten. But I just don't buy it trading into the draft that early. I think when you're looking beyond that, you're potentially looking at a Chris Duarte. If you're getting into the late lotto from Oregon, he's 24 years old. He's not typically what you see in these lottery picks. So if there's someone who's going to come in and hit a role right off the bat, it's probably him. I wouldn't be surprised if we're seeing him in those top 5 rookie discussions just from his overall production. And then I think Corey Kispert of Gonzaga, again, going back to a Gonzaga guy, I think he is a pure floor spacer. I think he played out of position at Gonzaga last year just by how small of a lineup they were. He's basically a shooting guard, small forward that was asked to play a lot of power forward in that zone defense up there in Spokane. So if you put him into an NBA system, I think he's going to thrive. I think those numbers are going to come up. But other than that, there's not a lot of short-term answers in the top of this draft that I'm seeing. There are definitely some attractive prospects that you can potentially just pivot your entire franchise towards and build around them. And I think among those, the most interesting for me is Jonathan Kuminga, who is a wing player, a true shooting guard that's 6'8", can play small forward, can create off the ball, but he's a project. And I don't know if that's the direction the Blazers are looking to go in at this time, especially for a McCollum trade.
Well, I mean, it would, and I think Zora agrees, don't you, Zora? It feels to me that if the Blazers, and I'll be honest.
How about you, Scout?
Oh, there we go. Yes, you said last episode, you said you're going to get your dog in here. I love it.
Well, her mom's gone. She's out with the kids, so she decides to actually come hang by me when I'm the only one left.
Oh, that's cool. Steve, where is your pet? We're going to need to see a pet right now.
I don't know if he's in here. He might be under the bed.
Bummer.
But so my lab is just too big to come in here. So,
by the way, to clarify, in the article, he did say top half of the draft. It was on 1080 when he did his radio hit that he said that was top 4.
So it seems to me, and Steve, I appreciate the run through because I'll be honest, I don't know a ton about the draft. That's why I depend on people like you and other people who are smart and who are actually following this stuff, who have binders with tabs on them. Again, I'm just super impressed by that. It seems to me if the Blazers are making a straight move, CJ McCollum for a number 4 pick, goodbye Damian Lillard, right? Like it is so rare that you get a draft pick who is able and ready to contribute immediately. It almost never happens. However, my thought was maybe there's a team, I mean, it only takes one, who really sees something in CJ McCollum and his specific skill set and their specific team. And, what they have to offer is a number 3, number 4, number 5, number 6 pick. And so then you get like a 3-team deal going and you have something else coming back to the Blazers. Maybe then. But in my view, if the Blazers are trading CJ for a top draft pick, you wave goodbye to Damian Lillard. That's
like this.
Yeah, like that.
If it's a top half pick, I think the team that is interesting me, and Brandon, to your point, I think asset collection here is something you might have to consider. Like you said, if that top pick is going to facilitate another deal, and I believe we're all kind of in the same mindset. I'm to the point now where I'm not expecting an equal return for CJ McCollum. If I can get more functional pieces, then we're in business. And if it is a top half, the team that interests me is the San Antonio Spurs. We've heard already this offseason, Zach Harper has reported that they are looking to reform their backcourt. DeJounte Murray, Derek White are both available. That doesn't mean that they would come back to the Blazers in this trade. It means they could be a piece in a 3-player trade. But if the Blazers somehow end up, with a pick there between 10 and 13 in the late lotto, and they bring in a player of equal value to Derek White and or DeJounte Murray, maybe at a different position that allows Norm Powell to slot back in at that shooting guard position, then I think you're cooking if you want to talk a draft-based trade. But it's to be seen. Like I said, after that Eric Pincus story kind of confirmed some of the stuff we've heard in the Jason Quick article, I don't think there's any team out there that's really dying to throw the Blazers a lifeline here and help them get out of this situation that Neil O'Shea has created with the asset pool for the Blazers.
Yeah, the Blazers need to they need to be the willing ones to jump in and be like, hey, so I heard team A and team B, you guys can't really get anything done. Any way we can help, to where that they're helping them as opposed to being the ones that are being helped. That's their best way to go about that. Another thing about the draft that we've heard is that Neil O'Shea is probably looking at buying his way into a second round pick. Steve, bust out your binder again and break down the second round for me, whichever tab that is.
Get to the red tabs.
Is there anybody in this draft that, for one, if they're revamping the bench to try to, help balance things out, could be a contributor, a diamond in the rough type, in the second round?
I don't know where he's going to fall in this draft, but Jeremiah Robinson-Earl from Villanova kind of fits the bill as a guy who can come in and play all the front court positions in a pinch. Villanova as a whole, now I don't want to compare class to class, but they have a pretty good track record of producing this prototype player that transfers from that Villanova system into the NBA successfully. We saw it with the Suns this year with Mikal Bridges. We've seen Eric Pascal have success with Golden State. I think Robinson-Earl is the next guy in that step. Now, where the real dividing line is, where you're going, well, if he's this versatile and he's this NBA ready, why isn't he, a clear-cut first-round pick? It comes down to his shooting. He's not a proven shooter by any means, but like I said, Mikal Bridges overcame some of these issues. Pascal's overcome some of these issues. I think he's functional. I think he has done so many things on that Villanova team as far as what his role is and what he is tasked to do year over year, that I think he's ready to take that step. And then just as far as looking for just a defensive minded type player, the player I'm kind of in love with in this draft for the Blazers, if they get back into the second round, if he falls there, is Herb Jones out of Alabama. You can go back to mock drafts I had 4 years ago where Herb Jones was kind of this freshman phenom that might have gone pro initially. His stock dipped a little bit after offensive questions, but he put everything together at Alabama last year. He was the SEC Player of the Year, SEC Defensive Player of the Year. He was the primary facilitator on offense for a lot of it. Now, he does have some shooting issues, which is why you're seeing some of these guys slide down the list. He's also a senior, so there is some questions about his overall upside. But if you're talking about putting a competent player on your bench that could see spot minutes early and potentially rotation minutes in that second and third year, which is typically kind of the Blazers' bread and butter with these second round picks, I think Herb Jones is your guy. And then finally, just to bring it back to the West Coast, I think Kessler Edwards is the last guy in this discussion. Pepperdine has played small forward, power forward, done a little bit of everything, an efficient shooter. Has, like I said, played a lot of what I said with Robinson-Earl is he's played a lot of different roles. He plays to his strengths. He's committed on defense. The question with him is obviously coming from the West Coast Conference, the level of competition he has faced before the NBA, but if he's able to adapt to that and his physical attributes and his skill set transfers, I think he could be the real steal of this second round.
So let me ask, I know that there's a lot of reporting to sift through, and I think, by the time we record next, the draft will have already happened. I believe it's on Thursday. Mm-hmm. Okay.
God, this offseason is going to fly by. It's going to be October in no time, isn't it?
Yes, sir. If you, with all the tea leaves you have to read and all of your various crystal balls, do you get the sense that the Blazers are going to make something happen on or before the draft, or do you not get that sense? And I know it's hard to tell, but I don't know. What do you think? Is something going to happen? Should I be looking forward to something come draft time on Thursday?
What's the something?
I don't know. I'm just anything. I'm making it easy. I'm just saying, do you think anything's going to happen with the Blazers around the draft?
I don't think you're going to see the monumental shift that a lot of people want to see. I think there is some, just from the reporting that's out there, and I think the overall mindset of some of what Billups' strengths were, is I think they want to see what he could potentially do with Dame and CJ first. I mean, that was one of the big selling points of what he did with the Clippers as far as making Paul George and Kawhi Leonard work. Because let's face it, before this year, the Clippers, after how they bowed out of the bubble, they were on the verge of blowing that thing up. So I don't think we're going to see the big blockbuster move. I don't think Nurk has moved. If he is going to get moved, it might be closer to the deadline. Same with CJ or Dame, potentially, if things really go off the rail. to get to your question eventually is,
can you please predict the future for me, Steve? That's all I'm asking. Honestly,
I think this is the Derrick Jones Jr. window to see maybe if something happens with him, it is going to be that contract. And this is the similar type contract structure that we saw the Blazers move with Trevor Ariza last year, a little differently. Trevor Ariza's was non-guaranteed money. Derrick Jones Jr. is a player option. So we could see, I think if there's going to be a move, it's going to be that contract. And then as far as getting back into the second round, it's probably going to be a future second rounder and some cash.
Exciting. I mean, and look, like I get that there are lots of different permutations that could happen here. And I think the more I think about this and the more that I learn, it's really going back to what Jody Allen wants to do and what she's valuing. And because she never talks, because she doesn't leak anything, I don't think, I like, to the best of my knowledge, I don't think we've ever gotten some report that's like, oh yeah, it's coming from Vulcan or Jody Allen. It's really tough to tell. So I guess we as Blazers fans are just going to have to embrace the uncertainty. I think with that, Ryan, did you have anything else, or how are we feeling?
I think that about wraps up this week's edition of As the World Turns in Blazerland. And I mean, I'm trying to check Twitter to see if Neil's done anything egregious within the last hour as we've been recording. Seems like we're in the clear, so I think it's safe to log off.
All right. Well, this episode of We Are Depressed Blazers Fans are brought to you by Steve, we appreciate you. If people wanted to reach out to you, ping you on Twitter or find your work, how would people do that?
So at Steve D Hoops on Twitter, also at the Church of Roy, at Church of Roy Pod is our podcast. If you want to hear more about what I discussed on the draft, yesterday I recorded with Mikey Weisenberg of Prospective Insight.
Yes.
He works under McKay Jr., who was a former front office person here with the Blazers under Rich Cho. A wealth of knowledge. He's one of the people I bounce my middling ideas off of. So a lot of information, very meaty draft episode. So if you're looking for that, I recommend going and checking that one out. But I appreciate you guys having me on. Like I said, two of my favorite follows on Twitter. I think we're all making it through this off season together, and I think
it's a group therapy session here.
Yeah, that's the community that we build is where it's at right here, and I think that's who you got to lean on through this insanity.
I agree, and this is my attempt at like a group hug thing. But Steve, we appreciate you. If you want to find us, you can. We appreciate all you listeners too. You can find us at Like the Blazers on Twitter, WeLikeTheBlazers.com. Subscribe, throw us a rating, whatever. You can find Ryan at The Witty Ryan and me at Golden PDX. And with that, that's it. Ryan, appreciate you. Steve, appreciate you. Ryan, I'll give you the last word. What do you want to say? What do you have to say for yourself, Ryan?
Peace.
Peace. Go Blazers.
Go Blazers.